Okay, just to repeat, I'm going to ask all the candidates in turn just to give a very quick answer to any of the points they wish to make from the points made on the floor, and then to offer their reason why you should vote for their particular party. So this will be the final part of the evening. So if I can ask all the candidates and the representatives to be as cogent as possible. Maggie, would you like to start?
Thanks. An awful lot in there. On public services, I think in some ways this is maybe the easy answer. We are clear that under the current Conservative government, public services post-Brexit are not safe. I think that's clear. We've seen what the Conservatives have done to social security. We've seen what the Conservatives have done to the very pillars of society, the things that enable us to function as a society over their time in power in Westminster. And quite frankly, that terrifies me too. And I think that's linked to your question about the rights for disabled people and the rights for people to have the kinds of support that they need. I think that the idea that we might be pulled out of the European human rights and European courts of justice is also absolutely terrifying. I think there are some foundational principles that are embedded in those that we have to hold on to, we have to hold on dearly to. And indeed, the Scottish Greens really want to see those extended beyond European borders, because why should they only apply to people who are born or live and work within the European Union? That they should be global rights and global possibilities. On Article 13, which is, I think Article 13 was an interesting one. It pits two, I think, quite important principles against each other. The idea that artists and creatives can earn a living from their art and their creativity, and the idea that we want to share things, that we want to have some kind of commons thing. I think on balance, the Greens, well, Scottish Greens would have voted against Article 13 and would do so again. I think there are other ways that we can support people and the creativity of our citizens to be supported financially and to be legitimised. In the Scottish Greens case, we were in favour of a universal basic income. That's just one policy idea that would support that. A specific question around how vision impaired people are treated. I think it is an abrogation of our duties if people are not allowed to access the services they require, access the transport systems they require, access anything that they require by virtue of being disabled. That is not acceptable. That is actually against the law, and we need to make sure that law is enforced, because at the moment it really isn't enforced. On diversity and difference, as I've already said, I think we have an opportunity to use these elections to stand up for the kinds of politics and the kinds of society we want. A society that is open and welcoming, a society that doesn't judge people on the basis of their origin. And that is why, for all and other reasons, I would urge you to vote Green next Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, obviously rather a lot there. Starting with the NHS, there is not going to be a £350 million a week for the NHS if Brexit happens. Be in no doubt about that. I am deeply concerned about a funding hit for the NHS and indeed a funding hit for everything else if Brexit happens. But the NHS specifically, we are already seeing EU nationals working in the NHS feeling anxious about their futures and their roles here. On clinical research, we are already seeing a chill in terms of a good friend of mine is doing Alzheimer's and dementia research in Edinburgh, funded by EU money with an international team hooked into the European research networks, all of which are at risk if Brexit happens. So we could see a chilling effect in terms of research, access to the networks of excellence, access to everything, access to medicines. If we do not see the supply chains continue, we could see nothing but bad news for the NHS and Brexit. And anybody who says they care about the NHS, who also says they're in favour of Brexit, is telling you or themselves lies. The gentleman's point The gentleman's point, because it was specifically for me about the Eurovision Song Contest, happy to reassure you the Eurovision Song Contest receives zero public money. It is organised by the European Broadcasting Union, which is the trade body of the different TV networks across the EU, and they make their money in the way that Channel 4 makes its money, or the BBC makes its money, or whatever. There is no public money goes to the Eurovision Song Contest. If I was in charge, it might be different, but that's a different question. On the question of air passenger rights and air passenger travellers' rights, this is something that could be maintained if it is agreed to be replaced with something else. And this is the problem that Brexit has on everything. It's possible that we could find a solution. Norway has found a solution. It's taken them many decades to find that solution, but they have found a solution. The UK has not, and after 3 years of intellectually vapid platitudes like Brexit means Brexit, they've not engaged with the nuts and bolts of what comes next. And in the independence referendum in 2014, we put forward a proposition for people to test. And some people were persuaded, some people weren't. That's democracy. The Leave campaign didn't, and they still aren't. That is a gross dereliction of duty and a gross disservice to our country's democracy. In terms of if a referendum goes the wrong way, I'm in favour of a referendum as a way out of this. If we can't find a majority of the MPs to simply revoke Article 50, I think that's the cleanest way to do this. It's the legally cleanest way to do this. It wouldn't stop the conversation, but it would continue the conversation without the crisis that a no deal or indeed a deal Brexit would be. Mrs May's deal was hotly negotiated, but it only deals with the exit and creates a 2-year period while we try to work out what comes next. That's just kicking the can 2 years down the road while Westminster will guddle about with nonsense. But by which point we'll be out and we'll lose those rights. So there's a lot at stake at this election, and what happens in these European elections will make the weather on what happens next at Brexit. I'm getting T-shirts made. I survived the 29th of March. I survived the 12th of April. The people who pretend to be in charge of this process aren't. You are. So with a vote for the SNP, you can make a big noise next week.
Okay, I'd just like to mention first the NHS, because the NHS is a national treasure for all of us. Other than, I have to say, the Brexit Party, who Nigel Farage wants to privatise the NHS. You know, so I think there's a lot of rewriting of history going on this evening. My partner works in the NHS as an orthopaedic surgeon and sees every day the benefit of having overseas workers. I tell you, if we remove that, that is so dangerous. If we think waiting times are bad just now, it could only get worse. And you know, to those who asked about disability, you're right to be concerned, because the way that the Tory party have behaved to those most vulnerable in our communities is disgusting, utterly disgusting. I remember a tweet going out about food banks and people saying, oh, it's all made up. Do you know, that is real life. People are queuing outside food banks because they are desperate to feed not just themselves, but their family. Children are hungry. In 2019, that should shame us all, but no more than the Conservatives who have caused that. Now, going forward as well, someone asked, and I think about what my stance is on independence was really, I think, probably the question. If there was another EU referendum, firstly, if there was another EU referendum, I would, as I had before, I would campaign to remain. The same, I'm afraid to tell you, if there was another independence referendum, I would be campaigning to remain part of the United Kingdom. I don't think either institutions are perfect and both need reformed. And just to finish up very quickly, I would say that the most important thing in this election is to reject the far right. It is so dangerous. And I hope that you might give people like myself an opportunity to represent you. But above all, do not go down the road of the Brexit Party or UKIP.
Thank you very much. Well, if it wasn't for the NHS, I wouldn't be here. My wife wouldn't be here. My son wouldn't be here. And my mother wouldn't be here. So I can tell you now that as far as the NHS is concerned, it's very dear to us. Look, we've got a lot of people coming in to the Brexit Party who are not far right. They're They're actually on the left side. They're joining us, as did a gentleman earlier on yesterday, who had been a lifelong member of the Labour Party for 30 years, cared deeply about his community, but feels very let down because people are telling him, if you're voting to leave, then you're not belonging here with us. So I'm saying to those people, look, Brexit, believe it or not, I know I'm talking to an audience that is largely Remain, I understand that, but I'm asking you to think about what it is you're actually really looking for. The lady that's down there that raised some really concerns about your future and how people who are disabled or people who need special care and help in our communities, how are they going to be treated? I can tell you now, for the last 11 years, I've worked without pay with Crime Stoppers because I'm a volunteer. Although I'm the Scottish Chair, I don't get paid for what I do. I care passionately, as do all the Brexiteers, about our communities. We want to help. You're shaking your head, but I'm telling you it's the truth. We do care. In terms of the gentleman who said, what happens if there is another referendum and we vote to leave? Well, if we continue the way we're going, we'll be back here again in another year or another 2 years having the same debates. But what happens to our democracy then? What happens to our institutions? You know, there's an awful lot of fear out there, and I would say to you, don't buy into it. Don't buy into it. Believe in us. Believe in us as a nation. We are capable of doing far more than that. And don't be afraid. We are going to get through this and together, and you'll see we're going to make it together, okay?
I'm going to start with Article 13, because we have a clear position on that, for a change. No, clear position on Brexit. Clear position on Brexit. We want to legislate to control the application, not the creation. So basically, we want to free the innovators. A number of the other questions actually can be summed up in a single point. We are a party, and I'm not suggesting we're the only one, we are a party that believes passionately in human rights. We believe in freedom and we believe in dignity. And that applies to people who suffer disability, it applies to people who have problems in the context of accessing properly the benefit system. We will stand for and campaign for freedom and dignity for all citizens within the United Kingdom. On the NHS, we know that there are 1,000 doctors in Scotland threatening, worried about, and feeling that they are required to leave Scotland in the event that we leave the European Union. There will be hugely less money for the NHS if we leave. We have problems with staffing today. I got a call this afternoon asking if I wanted to go to the declaration a week on Monday and would my husband come with me. Phoned my husband. 20 minutes earlier, he'd got an appointment with the doctor. That day, that's an appointment he has been waiting for 8 weeks. And strangely, he'd rather go to the doctor's appointment than come to the declaration in Edinburgh. The NHS is under enormous pressure and threat already. Leave the European Union, it will be worse. We need to stop Brexit.
Thank you, Chair. The point I would make about the NHS and our public services is that we are a democracy in this country, and ultimately, if you do not like the way that your public services are heading, you can change the government of the day. You can elect a different government at Westminster. You can elect a different government at Holyrood, and I hope. It is a democracy because in Scotland it is devolved to Scotland. The National Health Service is devolved to Scotland. the financial decision is made significantly up here. I don't think we should be getting into kind of backwards and forwards. I don't think that's fair on the rest of the audience here. I'm making the point that the National Health Service is administered out of Scotland. The Scottish Parliament has a vast amount of financial competence. It also has competence that has refused to take over welfare. So I don't think we should be taking any lectures from the SNP about anything to do with welfare reform. Primarily because they are not taking it on, and they are not. They are because they know that this is not going to make them popular. Welfare reform does not make anyone popular, but it is absolutely essential, because what we want to make sure is that people are not parked on welfare, because that is not good for people. It is not good for them. It is not good for their families, and it is fundamentally important that there are 1,500 people on universal credit in Stirling as of this month. There were 1,600 last month. There are 250,000 more people in work in Scotland. And the fundamental fact is that this is about getting people into work. And that is what universal credit does. It is what the welfare reform is designed to do, and it is what it does. That is the fundamental fact. Now, moving on to the other issues that were raised by the questioners there, I wanted to kind of respond to a few of those things. In terms of the things to do with the passenger rights, this is why we need to leave the European Union with a deal. We need to leave with a deal. Because with a deal, we can address things like passenger rights, we can address things like all of these practical issues. That is how we actually get it. The withdrawal agreement does not address that, the political statement does. And I think the point that was made by another questioner about how the withdrawal agreement and the political statement have been meshed together, that has been an enormous distraction in most of this debate. The withdrawal agreement is how we leave. It gives us time, as Alan said, maybe it's not enough, but as Alan said, it gives us time to sort out the details. I just wanted to respond to a couple of quick things here, because I think one of the things that we've got to remember here is that we shouldn't be scaremongering, and we shouldn't be spreading fear. And I think that what the Labour candidate said there is this scaremongering about universal credit, which causes people not to go and take help because they think they're going to be forced into a food bank. It is not fair. And I think that the scaremongering on EU workers' right, and at this point I would like to say my partner got a letter from Alan which outlined the worries and risks that he should face over his status in the UK after we leave the European Union, and it was misleading, and it was fundamentally problematic. I thought it was just badly written at first, but actually it just laid out the wrong position, it gave the wrong advice, and it causes panic and alarm. European Union citizens are entirely welcome in this country. They are entirely welcome here, and it is a fundamental thing which has been laid out since day one on this. And when people start saying rubbish, they're not welcome here, that is why they don't feel welcome here, because people keep telling them that they're not welcome here. They are welcome here. This government has said consistently that they are welcome here, and it is fundamental that we make them feel welcome and we make our fellow citizens welcome here.
Thank you. Time is knocking on, and I'm going to be very brief. Every one of those issues that you raised, every one of those fundamental problems that you face has overshadowed by one issue, Brexit. Until you clear Brexit out of the way, we can't clear any of it. We need to know whether or not we're in or out. We need that people's vote. We need to be able to have that people's vote based on what is before us and the evidence that supports it. Not stuff that's made up, the evidence that supports it. So it's really important that we have that people's vote, and that's what we're standing for. Change UK says our politics is broken. We require a change. We want a people's vote, and we will campaign nationally to remain in the EU, and Scotland remains part of the Union. Thank you.
Well, this brings the evening to a close. Thank you all very much. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I hope you found it interesting and helpful when you do cast your vote a week on Thursday. If I could just quickly thank a number of organisations and people. First of all, St Ninian's Church for allowing us to use their hall. Thank you to the European Movement for organising this event. A great thank you to the candidates. I think they've all performed very well, very enthusiastically, and very respectively to each other, points of view. And finally, thank you to the audience. Without you, we wouldn't have had an evening. So thank you all for coming. It was a lovely evening, but you made a choice to come tonight, so that's great for democracy. Hope you found it helpful. And thank you all again for coming, and a safe journey home.
Testing. Hi folks, just to let you know, we live streamed that event, independencelive.net, and you can actually watch it again at our website, okay? Bye now. Do you want a little song? Just as well I can't sing.